You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Randy Robinson here. How are you doing out there? How is your stress? How is your anxiety? I get it. We've been talking about this a fair amount because this is where a lot of people are living, and this is a very real thing. And so I like to go out and get people who are smarter than me to talk about this to help you, and I've certainly done that today. Today's guest is the author of a book called Dear Anxiety, Let's Break Up. And if you look down at the bottom, you'll see her name, Amanda Porter, PhD, and we were discussing beforehand, there's a lot of letters that could occur after that. She is triple board certified as a psychiatric mental health practitioner, meaning she practices internal medicine, psychiatry and mental health, as well as treating addictions. And so this is someone who has some very valuable insight. So I invite you to be a part of the conversation. Chat is open if you're chat enabled. If you're watching us live, watching in the replay, I hope this helps you out. It's good to talk about this, to work through it, to put you in a better place. So that's what we want to do here today. Dr. Porter, great to have you on Life Today Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I asked you before we started, because with this COVID thing's been dragging on for almost 2 years now, and you started writing this during COVID. I'm guessing that as you practice, as you see people every day, I'm guessing the anxiety level shot up. Long, right around March of 2020 and going into that, yeah?
For sure. Business is booming, not necessarily in a good way. I was actually chatting with our practice manager a couple weeks ago about what our numbers are looking like around here. And she shared with me that our outpatient practice has grown by 40% in the past 18 months. And that is just kind of mind-boggling. I mean, mental health and anxiety were such a predominant issue before, and now it's just 10 times what we were dealing with before. It's just crazy.
I'm curious, what are the driving things? Is it just COVID? Is it just the health thing, or is it things sort of related? Job loss, divisions within families, inability to see people? Is it a combination? What are you seeing?
All of the above, for sure. So, we've got this novel illness that is kind of unpredictable. We don't really know how that is all going to shake out. We have this issue of isolation. We're being told to stay away from people, the people that we love. We don't have easy contact with the people that we work with. Sometimes we don't even have consistent contact with. A lot of us are working from home. So I think the compounding of the isolation, financial concerns, maybe people have lost their jobs or their jobs are at risk. And then combine that with medical, like truly legitimate medical health concerns. And it's just this recipe for anxiety.
Yeah. Do you see that the mental health part of it is that primarily what it is, or is that turning around and impacting people's physical health?
Well, I think it's a both and. Yeah. So a lot of people who, if they have primarily a medical or somatic issue that's not being well managed, then they start to see anxiety cropping up because there's that uncertainty of the future. Mm-hmm. But then the opposite is also true, to where somebody is dealing with an anxiety disorder and it's manifesting in very physical ways. Mm-hmm. Anxiety is such a bodily experience for a lot of people. Maybe you have headaches, or maybe you have muscle tension or back pain, or maybe you have GI upset. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are difficult to manage.
It's amazing how many people go in with physical disorders and they come back and they're like, you're like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, stress, right?
Yes. It can be so frustrating. People go in to see their doctor because they have what they think is an ulcer, or they think maybe they have a migraine disorder, or they go to the ER because they think they're having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And then they get this workup and they're told, oh, it's just stress. And I think that can be a big letdown for people because tackling anxiety is it's not a one and done thing. There's no clear cut answer. It's often a lifelong battle for people.
Let me ask you about medication, because this is asked from a position of inherent ignorance, so just bear with me there.
Okay.
Because I don't like medication. Allergies are high in Texas right now, and my wife's like, "You need to," as I'm snoring through the night, she's like, "Would you take some allergy medication?" I hate taking medication, but yet I know people who say, no, I needed some chemical intervention in my body for their mental health. What's your position on that?
Yeah, this is a topic I can get a little feisty over because, in faith communities and Christian circles, there is this notion that if you're taking a medication for your mental health, then that means you are not praying enough, you're not believing enough, you don't have enough faith that God's going to heal you. And I just could not disagree with that more. I just see medication as one of the many tools at our disposal to help combat anxiety and depression. And I always like to remind people of that passage in the book of John where Jesus is healing the blind man. And Jesus could have very easily said in this story, he could have very easily spoken this man's healing into existence, but that's not what he chose to do. He chose to instead bend down, gather up some dirt. He spat into it, kind of made that muddy paste and placed that on the man's eyes and then said, friend, you're healed. Jesus in that moment chose to use a tool instead of granting this man some instantaneous healing. And that's how I view medication. I view medication as one of the tools that Christ has given us to help overcome our mental health struggles.
So you prescribe spit and dirt?
I do. It's very cost effective.
I compare it to help me understand. You can tell me to go read the Bible, but my vision is as such that I can't read on my own. And I've had lots of surgeries, and now I've got lenses implanted, but I used to have to wear contacts or glasses. Otherwise, I couldn't read my Bible no matter how badly I wanted to. I needed some medical intervention just to read the Bible. Is that a fair comparison between people who?
Absolutely. I work with people every day. They're so racked with their symptomatology. They are at a point where they cannot function day to day. And telling this person, well, if you just get more sleep and if you get some exercise and if you feed yourself well, yes, those are all great recommendations. But some people are just not at that level of functioning. They're not capable of doing those things. So I like to remind people that, medication can elevate you to a certain level of functioning, makes it easier for you to get out of bed every day, kind of clear your head, give you a little motivation. So then you can engage these other pieces of your self-care plan and your recovery plan. And it's typically a combination of things that people are going to need to achieve that level of wellness that they're looking for.
And I think that leads to an important point, which is if you're struggling with this and you can't get well on your own, which is often the case, no shame in that, go see somebody. We need,
yes.
Right?
Yes. And so this is a great time of year, right? January, all these New Year's resolutions, all these great intentions. And so I think if any of your listeners are saying, okay, 2022, this is the year, I'm going to get my mental health under control. Your step number one is to hire yourself a good therapist, because this is an incredibly difficult journey to tackle alone. You need someone in your life who can come alongside you and give you some good direction. So hire a good therapist is always my top recommendation for people.
Now, is your husband still a pastor? Is that still the case?
Yeah, my dad too.
Your dad too? Okay.
Yeah.
So what about that aspect of mental health especially, which is the spiritual side, because it's something that you're obviously tuned into? How important is that? Yeah,
I think that's incredibly important. I think that is part of the bigger picture. So this is the tension I do like to speak to, the tension that Christians in particular feel when they are dealing with a mental health issue, because often they will turn to someone in their faith community or they involve their pastor in their struggles, and they're met with statements or answers somewhere along the line of, well, are you praying enough? Do you have enough faith? Are you trusting God enough? I think mental health is over spiritualized a lot. And that notion that anxiety is a sin, I think that is a bit of toxic theology that ultimately just turns people away from running after God for their healing. There's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of blame built into the notion that all you need is God. And, so in some senses, yes, that is true. But in the context of mental health, that is one piece of the solution. It's multifaceted.
Yeah, the more I learn, the more I see that God's design for carrying out his will on earth is in community. And that's real hard for us independent American types, and men especially.
Yeah.
We want to be independent. I think that what we're talking about with the counseling and even the medical attention is a part of that community.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah. This is, no man is an island. We need community. We are biologically hardwired for connection with other human beings. As much as we think we can do this alone, we cannot. And I think that is one of the lies of depression and anxiety, is that, I need to isolate. I need to get away from people in order to feel better. But actually, the truth is that we need to lean into the relationships that we have with other people. Yeah, chances are, if you speak up about your struggles, the people in your circle, they're going to say, oh my gosh, I struggle with that too. Let's battle this together,
Yeah, no, I think that's hugely important. On the flip side, outside us tight little Christian circles, oftentimes the medical community and culture at large, they frown upon any kind of prayer. You're not going to pray that away, It's science. And I'm not down on science. I don't know that you can really address body, mind, and spirit without the spirit part of it.
Right. No, I would agree. I feel, really fortunate to kind of have a foot in each world. So, I've been living at this intersection of faith and mental health, not just because of my husband's job or my father's job, but also because I'm a clinician and I've struggled with anxiety personally. I feel like I have a pretty good handle on things from all these different viewpoints. And I think just more than anything else, we need to understand that the solution for people has to be multifaceted. There is no one size fits all. We can't, quote unquote, cure somebody with science alone, just like we can't heal or cure somebody with just throwing scripture at them alone. It has to be an all-encompassing treatment plan. Holistic, right?
Holistic. Yeah, right. Yeah. I really, that's the way God created us. Like I said, body, mind, spirit. And I think we need to focus on all of them if you really want to be whole. Otherwise, you're I don't know, you give yourself not a very good chance. All right. This is the book, Dear Anxiety, Let's Break Up. And we've kind of talked about subjects related to it, but I want to talk specifically about the book because, as a nurse practitioner, you sit down and you say, okay, what do people need to know? Yeah. So I'm guessing that this is right where a lot of people are living. Walk us through some of your points there.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course there's no one single answer to everyone who asks me this question of how can I deal with my anxiety or how can I eradicate my anxiety? There's often a lot of education that needs to happen first. So a lot of people want to understand why they're dealing with anxiety. They want to understand what's led up to it. So often there's a lot of education that needs to take place, a lot of self-reflection that needs to happen. I just like to remind people that, you're not alone. Just because you're struggling with emotions that are kind of getting the best of you, we are actually wired to have emotions. This is the way God created us. We're not crazy, because we might be dealing with an anxiety disorder. We were wired up in such a way that we have this innate stress response. So anxiety is an emotion. Emotions are a universal human experience. I like to remind people that emotions can be tricky to rely on. Sometimes they are unreliable. Sometimes they lie to us. I think emotions are communicators, but we really need to sit down and interpret them before acting on them. emotions can lead to some behavior that sometimes we regret later on. But I think bottom line, emotions are data. And I like to tell my patients that emotions get a seat at the metaphorical table, but they don't get to sit at the head of the table.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of people that maybe tuning in, they're like, what is the cure? I just need the cure. Is there a cure?
No, there is not. There is not. And this is part of the education that needs to happen. So I think, managing expectations is really important for your future mental health and for the outcome that is realistic ultimately. So there's a huge difference between curing and healing. Curing is as if an illness never happened in the first place, right? And so I like to use the example of strep throat. So you're diagnosed with strep throat, you go get your antibiotic, you take it, you're cured. You do not deal with the fallout of strep throat anymore. That's curing. Mental health issues, anxiety disorders cannot be cured. You can never wake up one day and say, I will never, ever, ever struggle with the fallout of my anxiety disorder again. For the majority of people, their mental health issue is chronic. My anxiety disorder, I know, will be chronic. I will deal with it on some level to some degree every day for the rest of my life. I think that I can be healed from my anxiety disorder in that I can maintain and achieve a certain level of peace and acceptance of my outcome, but I will never be fully cured from it. I think that mental health symptoms can go into remission, but they can crop back up. So this is part of the education I do with my patients, that the goal is never eradication with emotional issues. The goal is always manageability. Again, because we're human, we're not robots. We will have emotions that crop up from time to time, but rather we need to learn how to manage them.
So, okay, back to my the situation with vision. When I was a kid, and when my dad was asked politely to leave the Baptist church, and we started hanging around the more charismatic types, there was a lot. There was regular prayers for God to heal my vision. Right, because it was especially going in my teenage years. It was every year it was thicker and thicker glasses. It was getting worse and worse, and you hear, oh, Jesus healed blind people, right? So instantaneous healing did happen, can happen.
Sure.
Mine just got worse, and then my retina's detached, and then I had cataract. I mean, so right. So I know, right? It's like. You say these prayers for instant healing, and you run into people in the mental health arena. I know people who say, I was suffering from this and this and this. It was diagnosed. I was suicidal. I mean, all these things, and God instantly removed it. But then, like my co-host on the broadcast show, Sheila Walsh, she's learned a lot from her, and she's like, I wish God would just take it away, but for some reason he hasn't. And so I strive for the healing. I strive management, which to a lot of Christians, managing something in the mental health arena sounds like compromise. Whereas getting a knee brace, or wearing glasses or whatever, they don't even think of that as a compromise because they haven't received their healing. What is this? What is the proper theology, do you think? And that's a big, loaded, giant question. I get that. I know you've probably dealt with this some.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fantastic question. I think everyone has that story, someone they know, the friend of a friend who experienced this miraculous healing. And does God do that? Absolutely. Is he capable of doing that today? Absolutely. But that does not excuse me from doing the hard work of learning how to manage my emotions. I can continue to pray for that miraculous, instantaneous healing. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to be taking these steps. I'm going to be doing this hard work to get things under control because, I think the sad thing is that people who don't want to do the hard work and instead they're praying for that instantaneous relief, what they're actually missing out on are the lessons that they could have learned along the way. Like pain is such a powerful teacher.
That's so true.
And they're actually missing out tremendously on developing their character and refining. And I mean, all of that stuff's really uncomfortable. It's totally understandable why we as humans would want to avoid that process.
Yeah, it's kind of like the 20 pounds I need to lose. It's like, could someone just cut that right off?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I have to learn a little discipline and and do the hard work. It's just the older I get, the more I think we like shortcuts, and God's like, I'd rather you go through the process because that's where I'm perfecting my will in you.
Yes.
Another question that I have for you, especially for someone who's in the middle of it right now and they don't know exactly what's going on. How critical is it that they get a diagnosis, that they get a name to what they're going through so that they then know how to deal with it?
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's super critical. If you don't know what you're dealing with, how can you adequately treat it? And I think a lot of people are scared of labels. They're scared of stereotypes. They don't want to be kind of put in this class of people that they maybe feel like they don't belong in. But I see labels as actually a good thing because now we've put a name to what you're dealing with. Now we can connect you to other people with the same label, the same struggles. And, now I've got my clinician hat on for the moment, but now that we have a label, now we can bill your insurance company for what's going on and we can get you some care and we can get you, on that path towards healing and have your insurance company help out with that.
That's true. And again, back to my parallel. Yeah, I had a blind spot, but it wasn't until I realized, I had a detaching retina that I was able to get the care I needed.
Yeah.
The insurance, another matter, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. Insurance is such a racket. Right.
So let's kind of bottom line this a little bit for someone who's watching and they're like, okay, I'm getting a little good information here. What does someone need to do? Someone, I know people probably come up. You probably get this a lot at church. Hey, doctor, can I talk to you for a second? What are the practical steps people need to do to start on that pathway of healing?
Yeah. So number one, like we were talking about before, reach out, hire yourself a good therapist. And then step number two is to start working on that self-care piece. Self-care is huge. You really stand very little chance of having a stable mood and a stable thought life if you are not getting consistent sleep, if you are not moving your body every day in some way, if you are not getting good nutrition or hydration. Like those are the very core, just bedrock tenets of self-care. Those things must be in place. Those are the non-negotiables of self-care. And then I think kind of next level self-care would be things like having a mindfulness practice, keeping a gratitude journal, doing some soul work, working on your self-compassion, setting those boundaries, setting those limits. I talk a lot in the book about checking your input. This is huge. In my opinion, all of these cues, all of this input that we're getting as we move through our day, they really do affect our thought life, and our thought life leads to behavioral changes. And so checking your input in terms of who you're allowing to speak into your life, what kind of media you're exposing yourself to, even your physical surroundings. So, what state is your bedroom in? What state is your car in? What state is your workplace in? If you're living in a cluttered environment, your mind and your thoughts will reflect that. So, things like that kind of all are wrapped up in this self-care practice.
Yeah, you throw a little Zig Ziglar in there. You need to check up from the neck up because you got some stinking thinking. And right, the scripture. I talked about this with another guest recently. Paul says, "Don't be anxious about anything."
Oh yeah.
Is that helpful if we don't fully understand the context of that? Just to say to someone, "Well, the Bible says don't be anxious."
No, that is incredibly unhelpful. I mean. I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who has been struggling with anxiety for forever. I've been working up the nerve to talk about it with somebody. And I'm told, oh, well, it's a sin to be anxious. Like, how does that do anybody any good? I really do think that those words in Philippians from Paul, I really don't think that those were meant to be taken literally.
Well, I think what according to a different expert, more of a theological expert, it's the connotation, it's the context. And when you look at the context of the original writing, he was saying there was a verb that had to do with your thoughts. Don't dwell on the anxiety, because if you look at the rest of the scripture, then Paul tells you what to dwell on, what to think about, whatever's good, whatever's right. Yes. And yes, exactly that. So I view it not as much as well, if you've got anxiety, it's a sin. No. If you've got anxiety, don't set your mind to that, but set your mind to these other things instead, which is kind of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think, just going back, putting my scientist hat on and going back to what I know about how we're wired and how we're created with this innate stress response, we cannot help being anxious. That initial hit of anxiety, that is going to happen whether we want it to or not. But how we choose to handle that anxiety, well, that's on us. So if we are choosing to dwell in those negative thoughts, then I think that that's kind of what Paul is speaking to.
Yeah.
If we're allowing our anxiety to drive us towards some untoward behavior or some sinful choices, then obviously that's going to lead to a life of sin. But that initial rush of that anxious thought, that in of itself, it is not sinful. There's some nuance there, I think.
Definitely. And I think it kind of fits with the title of your book, because Dear Anxiety, Let's Break Up implies some sort of relationship going on there. And you get to choose.
Enmeshment, yes.
Yeah, you get to choose whether you stay in that relationship or not. And I think it starts with your thoughts and what you choose to dwell on, what you choose to do. If you take the steps that Dr. Porter's talking about and laying out, very practical steps, very doable, you will be on that pathway to healing. And you get to make that choice not to stay in that abusive relationship that you're in. So wrap this up for us. I really appreciate your insight, especially from the position that you're in, seeing the spiritual and the physical side of things. Last word from you.
Yeah, I would just encourage people to be vulnerable, speak out. Chances are that there are people in your life that are struggling and you have no idea. But if you're the one to take that first step, be vulnerable, be courageous, share with the people in your life that you're struggling, I think you're going to realize that a lot of other people are struggling too. This monumental task of overcoming anxiety is always easier when you have a team on your side. So be vulnerable with the people that you love, get the help that you need, and we're all in this together.
Great advice from a medical professional, guys. So you can't argue with that. Dr. Amanda Porter, thank you so much. I want to point people to your website. It is amandaporternp.com. That's in the chat. Amanda Porter Nurse Practitioner is what that stands for, amandaporternp.com. You can find some resources there. And then, of course, check out the book. And be sure to come back. We've got more great things for you here on Life Today Live. Hit share, hit like, hit subscribe, hit follow, all those good things. And we'll see you again next time right here on Life Today Live.
No longer will I rely upon my goodness, upon my personality. But Lord, I just come as a bankrupt sinner, saying, Lord, have mercy on me.